The first controversy about this narrative of marriage is about the date of marriage. Certainly, if there was a marriage, there will have to be a date. So, on which day were Subhas Chandra Bose and Emilie married? Interestingly, the Hindustan Standard Story, which for the first time announced the existence of Emilie and Anita, did not give a date to their marriage. Of the many books being written on Subhas, some referred to their relationship, but none of them gave any specific date. For example, in 1950, a book written by Girija Mukherjee, who was very close to Subhas in the Free India Center in Germany, wrote a book called This Europe. But in that book, despite being so close to Subhas and Emilie, he never mentioned anything about them. The next major biography, in fact, the first critical biography, if one might say so, came in 1959. That was written by Hugh Toy, The Springing Tiger. Now, Toy was part of British intelligence and he had seen many documents. So, he was aware of the interrogation reports and other information collected by them. So, he wrote about the relationship of Emilie and Subhas, but he also did not give any date to their marriage. He left it open. In the same year, another book was written by N.G. Ganpule. Ganpule, like Girija Mukherjee, was also in the Free India Center in Germany and saw Subhas and Emilie from very close. He referred to their relationship, he talked about it, he wrote about it, but again he also did not put a date to it. In fact, he did not even mention that they were ever married. The first time an attempt was made to put a date to the reported marriage between Subhas and Emilie was probably by Krishna Bose when she wrote an article in the Illustrated Weekly of India in 1972, where a specific date was not given, but it was indicated that it happened sometime after Subhas reached Berlin, around 1941 or so. In 1977, when the Netaji Research Bureau filed a case against the Jayashree Prakashan of Leela Roy for copyright claims, they had alleged that Jayashree violated the copyright of the Research Bureau. Shishir Bose in his affidavit mentioned that the marriage took place in 1942. No date, but the year mentioned was 1942 in his affidavit on oath. In the same year, in 1977, Shishir's brother, elder brother, Ashoknath Bose, who was Sharat Chandra Bose's eldest son, wrote his reminiscences of Subhas in a book called My Uncle Subhas. In that book, he gave all the details about their relationship and how Sharat Bose went to Vienna to meet Emilie and all. But even there, he did not mention any date of the marriage. Neither did another biography published in that same year by the well-known communist leader Hiren Mukherjee. Hiren Mukherjee wrote about the relationship of Subhas and Emilie, but he also avoided mentioning any specific date. A few years later, when the Czech historian Milan Hauner wrote his voluminous India in Access Strategy by consulting German archival documents and intelligence documents, he mentioned Emilie as Subhas's common law wife. A common law wife is something that means that they were never formally married. And Hauner had checked all the documents, every possible document available at that time. And that's the conclusion he reached, that Emilie was the common law wife, that they lived together, that they presented themselves to the outside world as man and wife. But there was no ceremony held, there was no ritual held, and the marriage was not formalized. Shishir Bose in the meantime had started writing in the children's magazine in Bengal, Anandamela, a series called Boshubari from the early 1980s, which was finally given a book form in 1985. In that book also we see that Shishir never mentioned any marriage ceremony or occasion or date. A date to the marriage was given in 1990 when the first scholarly biography of Bose was published by Leonard Gordon. The book was named Brothers Against the Raj. In this book, Gordon wrote that Emilie had told her that she and Subhas were married in December 1937 when they lived in Badgastein and Subhas was writing An Indian Pilgrim. It was a break which Subhas had taken to recuperate from his illness before plunging back to Indian politics as the Rashtrapati of the Indian National Congress. However, while presenting December 1937 as the date, as the time of their marriage, Gordon also highlighted the confusing statements coming from other sources on different occasions. He pointed to Krishna Bose's article in the Illustrated Weekly, where she had indicated the marriage to have taken place in 1941. He also indicated that Emilie herself had told the director of the Nehru Memorial Library, while giving an interview for their oral history project, that the date of marriage was December 1937. He also referred to an unpublished manuscript written by Alexander Worth, who was in the German Foreign Office and who came down to India, especially to the Netaji Research Bureau during one of their seminars to talk on Netaji, and has co-authored a book on Netaji. In that manuscript, Alexander Worth, according to Gordon, has mentioned that Subhas and Emilie were not married. Next came a publication by the Netaji Research Bureau itself in 1994, when amidst much controversy, they published a volume containing letters written by Subhas to Emilie. The volume contained about 180 letters, 162 of which were written by Subhas and 18 by Emilie. In the introduction of the book, the co-editors of the volume, Shishir Bose and Sugata Bose, mentioned that Emilie and Subhas were married on 26th December 1937. Now, they did not mention how they got this date. They did not mention why this date changed from the earlier dates which was held by the family, specifically Krishna Bose and Shishir Bose. Krishna had mentioned around 1941 and Shishir had emphatically stated on oath in a court of law that they were married in 1942. So how that 1941 and 42 changed suddenly to 1937, that was never explained. Sugata Bose, in his pretty substandard biography of Netaji, His Majesty's Opponent, which was published in 2011, maintained this date, 26th December 1937. He said that they were secretly married on this date. Again, without any explanation why the dates changed. The explanation for the change in these dates was finally given by Krishna Bose in her book Netaji and Emilie, A True Love Story, which was published in 2016. According to Krishna Bose, the year of marriage being announced as 1941 or 42 was based on family story. Now, how surprising, in a family full of historians and top-class intellectuals, till 1990, nobody really bothered to ascertain the date of Subhas and Emilie's marriage. Krishna Bose wrote that it was for the first time that Emilie informed Leonard Gordon in 1978 that they were married in 1937 December. Now, Subhas Chandra Bose and his family had got in touch with Emilie in 1948. From 1948 to 1978, why didn't Emilie give the date of their marriage to anybody in the family? And why did she give it to Leonard Gordon in 1978, 30 years after she was contacted by the family? She gave it to an outsider, not to a family person. That is, I think, a very valid question. Now, this is where the flip-flop story of Emilie comes in. As we will see, that over a period of time, she has changed her position, her statements a number of times. Let's start with the date of marriage. When Emilie wrote to Subhas Chandra Bose for the first time on 12th March 1946, She knew that she couldn't be vague or evasive on the question of marriage, particularly when she was writing to the elder brother of Subhash. She had to be clear about the marriage issue. So there she wrote, and I read, "Your brother asked me when I was in Berlin if I would accept his proposal to marry him. Knowing him since years as a man of good character, and since there was a mutual understanding and we were very fond of each other, I agreed. The only difficulty was to get the necessary marriage permission from the German government. Though Austrian by birth, I had at that time been a German subject and therefore to obey German laws. And it was very difficult for a German to get the permission to marry a foreigner. And since we both did not want to beg for a favor and wanted also to avoid making an affair of the whole matter, we decided to settle it between ourselves and got therefore married according to Hindu fashion in January 1942. The whole thing was kept a secret, only two friends knowing about it." Now, Emilie's letter gives absolutely no clue that they were already having a relationship, which the subsequent publications make clear. And she gave a specific time of their marriage, January 1942, to Sharat Chandra Bose. And she also mentioned that they were married according to Hindu fashion. Now, how exactly it happened, nobody knows. What she meant by Hindu fashion, there was no clarification. But that's what she wrote in her letter to Sharat Chandra Bose. She also mentioned about the specifics of a marriage to Sardar Patel. In a letter to Sardar Patel, which was forwarded by Nathalal Parikh, Emilie made a very categorical statement. She wrote to Sardar Patel that, "According to the law, I am not married to be Mrs. Subhas C. Bose," which makes it as clear as possible that they were not formally married by law. Now, let me go back to Shishir Bose's statement, which he made under oath to the court in Calcutta in 1977. In his affidavit, he made clear categorical claims that Bose and Emilie's marriage were valid under German law and valid under Indian law. Unfortunately, nobody stood up to challenge him on those grounds, but clearly we can see that what he was stating was not the truth. It ran against what Emilie herself wrote. Now, from this 1942, January 1942, Emilie suddenly changed herself. Can't blame anybody else. Herself changed the date of marriage, date of secret marriage, to 26 December 1937. We will never know why, what made her change the date, why she had written January 1942 to Sharat Chandra Bose, and why she wrote December 26, 1937, or told about it to Leonard Gordon in 1978. But before telling that date to Leonard Gordon in 1978, Emilie had said that given the same date to B.R. Nanda, the director of the Nehru Memorial Library, in 1971, but had categorically again requested Nanda not to publish her the date of that marriage on the transcript. That's rather strange. I mean, why would that secrecy be required? So there is a lot of flip-flop from Emilie's side. Another example of this suddenness or change from Emilie's side that we can see is in the case of the letters. When Sharat Bose asked Emilie whether she had copies of the letters with her, copies of the letters which were exchanged between Subhas and Sharat when Subhas was planning to resign from the Indian civil service when he was studying in England, Emilie said that she did not have the letters. If she had them, she would have certainly known. But suddenly in 1980, she discovered those letters. So Sharat had asked them about those letters in 1948. So 1948 to 1980, 32 years. 32 years later, she suddenly discovered not only those letters but also the romantic letters which Subhas had written to her. So it's the suddenness of these things warrant the raising of doubts and questions. I think they are pretty justified. But we should also be careful not to be waylaid by these doubts.